went to GW a while ago. We have here students of GW who were not even born. I see a couple of them in the hall at that time, so I wouldn't mention exactly the, I mean, it was back in 94, 95, 96. However, I have to see that there is Ralph Steinhardt here, whom I recall very well. Most importantly, there are also two ladies, Shehnaz Joshi and Dana Shelton. And the problem is, what I have a problem here because they haven't changed a bit for all this. And well, I mean, I should have stayed here, I think. There is something very special about this place. And so actually, it happened so that I came to the US on a congressional scholarship back in 1993, and I went to Columbia Law School, and which was blessed at that time, and I was lucky that it had amazing professors like Oscar Schachter, Lou Henkin, and they were, Oscar was my supervisor there, and I worked very closely with him. And Oscar Schachter, for those of you who don't know, he wrote the UN Charter back in the 40s. So I was lucky to be taught by somebody who wrote the UN Charter of that very useless organization anyway, but some people think, but the Charter is very good, and actually it has no very mechanism, but from the old point of view, and then Lou Henkin. And Lou Henkin during lectures used to, and he was like big thinker, and of course he was one of the founder, basically pioneer of international law in America, right? And so during the lectures, which I think I really hated about him, he was old kind of Cold Warrior, and so he would go around and see, so whatever happens, you know, disarmament talks and this conflict and that conflict, he would turn in front of 300 people and said, it's their fault, pointing at me, like Soviet Union. Well, I hated Soviet Union 10 times more than Lou Henkin even would imagine, but and then what happened that I applied, I had this 1-year study of master's obviously, and then I understood that I don't know enough, that it's not enough for anything. So I was looking around, and obviously we had, I looked at George Washington, because before in Strasbourg, Dinah Shelton was twice there, my lecturer at the International Institute of Human Rights, from which I also have that diploma. And she was teaching me with book of Tom Buergenthal, obviously. Then I attended his lecture also in Budapest. And Tom Buergenthal was an absolute legend, we all know. I mean, he was a founding member of Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which was really hot court. And we learned those cases in Strasbourg. And it's something that really concerned individual fates of lots of people. And that was, if you ask me what was one single important instrument that changed Americas, especially South and Latin, General Central America, that was that court. I mean, it really had a considerable impact. Because for many decades before that, the dictatorial regimes thought that no matter what they would do, it was holy, it was something that was meant to be done, and they would always get away. And suddenly, this group of, and especially Tom Buergenthal, was first ever American judge to be appointed there, come there and say, wait a minute, the time of impunity is over. And you people, there's finally a place where you can go to. So I obviously applied for doctoral program, which actually, as you know, it's another master's, in fact, because you have to earn credits for another year, and then you just have to submit your doctorate. And I came here, and it was obviously a very interesting time, very interesting experience. I went a lot to congressional hearings, do things in DC, and Shehnaz was extremely generous, and with her time and attention, and I also got tuition waiver, and this also thanks to Tom and Shehnaz. And he had amazing seminars. From those who are lucky enough to attend them, you know that what I'm talking about. But there was this thing that at one seminar, already in the end of my studies, it was second semester, my classmate from New Zealand, in the end of the seminar, I don't know what brought this conversation, but she said, you know, she raised this issue with the movie that had just appeared, Schindler's List, by, of course, by Spielberg. And so she started to kind of approach Tom Buergenthal, what do you think about this movie? And he tried to avoid the subject. And he moved to another, he continued the seminar. She kept moving back, bringing him back to Schindler's List. So he said, you know, I cannot watch this movie. I've not watched it. I'm not going to watch it because I've seen it and it's not. So, and then we started to say, please tell us what did you see? What's your experience? So it was, I remember very well, it was somewhere after like maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And he started to recount the story. And we basically, we got, I mean, it started and he told the story which we were glued to our chairs, and he finished telling it in up to almost like 2.5, 3 hours he was telling. And we didn't feel how it passed. It was 1 minute, just like that. And we relived much more than any movie can show you. And the story was amazing. The way how they were taken away from last ship to be taken to the camp, how his father, who was a very prominent and amazing man, how he basically tried to protect people in the camp for all these years in Auschwitz. And how in the end, after this death march, and I remember it very well exactly because I went to Auschwitz also in January, and the first thing I remember was you telling me about the death march, about this cold weather there before your things to Sachsenhausen, and how his brother succumbed in the end, and how his father basically gave himself in because he could not tolerate that he couldn't protect his son. And how then, in the end, Tom was put on in that horrible place. Which, I mean, I saw this gas chamber. Until you see it, you cannot imagine how perverse a human being can be. I mean, no matter what you see on television, once you are there, you just, it's something else. And so they were put on that death. And there is this book which I also saw, and there it tells the story. But when he told it, this was, I'll never forget that. You know, they had to gather a certain amount of prisoners before they would send them to gas chamber, and they still lacked few of them. So they had a couple of hundreds, but they lacked few of them. And because of this Nazi orderly way, even if they knew that they had no time left, because obviously the army was approaching that would liberate this camp, they didn't put them there because they thought that they had rules to follow, whatever rules there were. And that's how he survived. And then he told us a story about post-war Germany, how they were treated, about his quest to find his mother through Red Cross and all the other things, and how finally they got reunited, and how then he got to Harvard, first to several American universities, and finally to Harvard. And these are the stories that, this is the story which no other story in my life made on me bigger impression, let's put it this way. So this is somebody with his experience, also understands every oppressed person worldwide very well. That's why I think ICJ was extremely lucky to have him as on the court, and he left incredible trace in there. I know from people whom I know that very well, and they're out the ICJ. They created a very important precedent in the Inter-American Court, but also a very important legacy at ICJ. And most importantly, you are his legacy. You are his people. You are the people who will make something that Buergenthal is doing so important. Now, I have two things to do. First of all, when I was leaving the university, so I got elected to the Georgia Parliament, and I was elected as I went back, and I was head of to the Parliament. Incidentally, there was a member of Georgia Parliament now who is a student at GWU. Before, you needed qualification of being from GW to become member of Georgia Parliament. now it's vice versa. So, which speaks better of GW, how it progressed. By the way, in the rankings, it rose way up since then. And so I went to him and I said, here's, you know, I had very complicated subject of international law, which I still cannot fully pronounce. It was in Latin. And so I went to him and said, as a professor, I mean, I've just got elected to the parliament, you know, don't, you know, but don't worry, I'll write this dissertation, I'll get back to you. And so he looked at me with, yeah. And so here he was, and then he told me, and he told me, but you know, you drop this complicated subject. You should do dissertation on some other subject. I said, like what? You know, like building a new country. I said, what kind of legal subject is it? I mean, how legal is it, Professor? He said, well, I don't know how legal is it, but that's exactly what you'll be doing for the years to come. And I have to report to you, Professor, that indeed when I went to Georgia, it was a failed country. It was a country which had no electricity. It was run by kleptocrats, or was not run at all, but you know they pretend to run it. It was full of crime. When I got back, you know, bullets were just flying on all the way. We had no electricity. We had no elementary amenities and things. Now, Georgia, under my presidency, has become, according to the World Bank, and for small countries, benchmarks matter, world's #1 reformer based on 8 years data. We became, according to the World Bank, on the World Bank list of the best doing business, the best business destination in the world, #9, and first developing country ever to make this top 10, because it's headed by Singapore. US is #5 on that list. Say Germany is #17, and Georgia had been the only one from Eastern Central Europe, and #1 reformer in Eastern Central Europe, easiest place in Eastern Central Europe and post-Soviet space, all and to do business, but actually also. First developing country to make this top 10. According to the World Bank, we had the world's fastest customs procedure, world's fastest ID issuance, world's fastest property transactions, world's fastest company registration. So we were, as I told you, one of the most criminalized countries in the world, and we became, according to the European Union, least criminalized country in terms of crime rate in Europe. We basically outperformed Iceland on that, and we became last year of you know, just 1 year before my term expires end of this year, but last year we became the least corrupt country in Europe, according to the data of the European Union. So that's what I have. I'm just reporting to you the results of whatever you told me to do. So, two things. You told me to write dissertation about how to build new country. I brought you something. It's not really my doctoral dissertation. But it's a
You should have submitted it.
it's a thing what was built under my presidency for the last 6 years, New Georgia, actually. All the buildings and new cities we developed. I have claimed that I think we did it best of all, at least in our region and maybe worldwide. So that's whatever it could be considered, but whatever the academic things are. And the other thing, obviously, you know, on behalf of my nation, and this is bigger than our relations, obviously, and my respect for him, for this amazing work you've done for just great cause of humanity worldwide, and really one of the greatest persons of what you can say, representatives of our human race, really here. And on behalf of Georgia nation, I want to give you the Medal of Excellence, and I think that's the list of the things that can characterize your existence and your achievements. Thank you.
thing that President Saakashvili didn't tell you. One day he came to me, I don't know whether it was in the first or second semester, and he said, could I be excused for a week? And I said, why? I have to go home and run for parliament. And I said, can you do that? Oh, yes. And he came back, had run in parliament before I knew it. He was head of the faction in parliament and Minister of Justice, where I'm told he did a magnificent job because of the serious problems that Georgia had with justice and corruption. And then he became president. I wish I could take credit for it. I can't. My colleague says, go ahead. but I can't. And I'm profoundly honored to see him here. And I also wish him the next time around to again become president of Georgia. I should tell you I'm particularly pleased and honored with the medal because in The Hague, all of my colleagues and the ambassadors all had medals. And I didn't. I wish you'd given it to me before. But it's wonderful what you have done, and I'm profoundly honored by your honoring me today. I should tell you, like we always say, but I really mean it. I really don't deserve it. You deserve all the praise. Thank you.